Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Literary Hour. I'm your host, Jackie Saye, and of course, my co-host is Professor Moses Nangbe, who will be joining us momentarily. Today, we're very pleased to have as our guest Mr. Alexander B. Cummings. Welcome, Mr. Cummings.
Thank you, Jackie. Good to be with you.
Yes, and as our audience knows, the Literary Hour discusses all things historical and literary and everything that has to do with the arts. So today we will be focusing our questions to Mr. Cummings on just that, on the arts, history, and the development and role of the arts in Liberia. So we'll start with a brief introduction. I know most of you know Mr. Cummings, and you know that what he stands for, but there are others who are not from Liberia who do not know Mr. Cummings. So we will start the introduction now, and then we'll go into the questions. So, sorry, if you hold on one second. Mr. Cummings is, and this is the perils of technology. Sorry. So Mr. Alexander Benedict Cummings is a Liberian politician, businessman, and philanthropist, and the standard bearer of the Liberia's Alternative National Congress. In 2016, Mr. Cummings announced his candidacy for the presidency of Liberia. A Liberian by birth, Mr. Cummings studied at Cottington University College before continuing his studies at Northern Illinois University, where he earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Finance and Economics, and then went on to earn an MBA in Finance from Clark Atlanta University. Mr. Cummings is passionately committed to Liberia's development and the development of the entire African continent. In 2015, along with his wife Teresa and children Borka and Ayo, he launched the Cummings Africa Foundation, which to date has invested nearly $1 million into health, education, entrepreneurship, the arts, women, youth empowerment, and infrastructure projects in Liberia, resulting in meaningful change. Mr. Cummings' 4 decades of international business is highlighted by a 19-year tenure at the Coca-Cola Company as regional manager for Nigeria, president and chief operating officer of the Africa Group, and then culminating in becoming the executive vice president and chief administrative officer of the same company. Although most people know of his work at Coca-Cola, prior to that, Mr. Cummings was vice president of finance for Pillsbury International, with financial responsibility for growing a $1.2 billion international food business. At the time, he was also the most senior of African descent. Mr. Cummings currently serves on the board of S.C. Johnson and Son here and Clark Atlanta University, where until October 2016, he served as the chairman of the board. He is also a board member of Coca-Cola Bottling Company. And until May of this year, he was on the board of Chevron. He is also a member of the Executive Leadership Council. Mr. Cummings, we want to welcome you again, as I said, to the Literary Hour, and we can begin our discussion.
Thank you, Jackie. And let me say I'm looking forward to this conversation. It gets me away from politics per se. Let me also say, in preparation for coming on, that I went and did some reading, some refresher about Liberian history and Liberian literature. And so I thank you for the opportunity to actually to go back and do that. So I'm looking forward to the next hour of conversation.
Okay. As our viewers know, when we started this Liberian Literary Hour, we said that we are on a journey. We are on a journey to discover what does it mean when we say we are Liberians. When we say we're coming home, what does home entail to us? You know, a lot of us will go home, like me, we take our kids home, they volunteer, you know, but what does that mean when you say we're coming home? And what does it mean when we look at the place of Liberia in a global community of nations, then and now? You know, so what we're doing is you are just someone who's going to take us, also go with us on this journey to rediscover the Liberian self. So the first question we're going to start with is one that we're going to talk about Liberian literature. So a lot of people talk about Chinua Achebe, they talk about Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Wole Soyinka. And we always say that it is a miss when people talk about those and not talk about Liberian literature. Because as we know, the very first West African novel in English, Guyana Pau, was written in 1891 by Joseph Walters, a Liberian. And then the second novel, written in 1932 by Bafali Kani, Love in Ebony, is also a Liberian novel. And both of these novels portray very strong Liberian women, women that were not afraid to demand their place, women that had agency. So our first question to you is that,
it's all about entertainment.
so after the first these novels that have shown us the women that we know. I always talk about my great grandmother Mary Vinton Davis, who is the strongest woman I know. So based on all of these feminist novels, now we're seeing novels where women are disempowered.
Honestly,
Women lack agency. So the first question is, what are your programs and policies regarding the empowerment of women in the national sphere? And what would a Cummings administration bring to the table in strengthening women's space in Liberia?
Yeah, so Jackie, first of all, I think you're correct in the assertion that in general, um, our women are not as empowered as they can and should be. They are not the equal partners that we want them to be, that they need to be, if we're going to move Liberia forward. But in making that statement, though, I want to acknowledge that we have had some powerful women
excuse me.
in our country's history. Uh, you know, for example, Chief Swakoko was one of the early women
I
chiefs.
come to the university.
Andrew Brooks Randall, another empowered Liberian woman.
Yeah.
Catherine Cummings was a senator, one of my grand aunts from Nimba. Uh, of course,
If
our former
you
president,
in Lima
Elizabeth
country,
Ellen
just give
Johnson
me a
Sirleaf,
look.
a Nobel laureate, former president Lima Bowie, same thing. So as we think about the way forward, it's good to acknowledge that. And you mentioned I believe your grandmother or your
My
mother.
great grandmother, yes.
Yeah. My mother, Ayo Cummings, was one of the toughest people I know, and I give her a lot of credit together with my father, but even more so my mother, for who I am today and where I am today. So I just want to ground our discussion in the fact that we have these examples and many more. Now, as we look ahead, as look at where we are now, uh, I'm one of those that believe, Jackie, that if we really want women to be equal partners, because the evidence, the research around the world shows that when women voices are heard, when they are at the decision making table, you make better decisions. Organizations are better off, they get better results, and so are countries. And so I believe, and I'll be advocating for affirmative action. What do I mean? That we need to mandate in our laws that women need to be, and we can debate the percentage, but whether it's 30%, 40%, 50%, whatever that number is of the different organs of government. Because I think if you don't, excuse me, if you don't mandate it, I think it will just take too long to happen, if you want it to happen organically. The patriarchy is strong, it's powerful, and I think you have to force it. You got to be affirmative. And so I go on record saying that that's something we need to mandate. There are a few countries in Africa that have done that, like Rwanda, for example. I believe Kenya is one of those that have mandated that. I think Ghana and Senegal, not 100% sure, but doesn't matter. Uh, even if nobody else has done it, we should be pioneers in this space because, again, I strongly believe that if we want to move Liberia forward, that's one of the things we got to do differently, and we got to have women at the decision-making table to move our country forward. So, for sure, from a Cummings administration or Cummings advocacy, that's something I will not only want to encourage, only want to support, but we will propose legislation to make sure it happens. I will also remind your listening audience that, I often say the best way to predict future performance or future behavior is past behavior, past performance. And so, in a recently held by-election in December, the CPP, Collaborating Political Parties, and I was chair at the time, we had, of the 15 candidates we had running for the Senate, we had five women. I don't want to take personal credit for that. It was a collective effort, but it did happen under my chairmanship. And that's just an example of the CPP's commitment and mine, our commitment to making sure we have women uh, in leadership, and we're supporting them for both elected and appointed office. I remind your listening audience that uh, the main ruling party, CDC, had no female candidate running in the last election. But beyond the politics, though, in every sphere of life, we need to encourage women participation. And that means we need to provide the support they need to participate, whether it's financial support, whether it's building infrastructure around childcare, making sure our schools have after-school programs so the mothers and the husbands can, take advantage of that freedom to more, to get more involved in society. All of those things are things we need to pursue and we will aggressively pursue if we're fortunate to get opportunity to serve our country as leader.
Yeah, thank you so much. Uh, when we were discussing the characteristics of African literature, we said that one of the hallmarks is community. The community strengthens the individual, and the individual works to strengthen the community. Once the individual steps outside of the community, there is a problem. So Achebe explains that for a society to function smoothly and effectively, its members must share basic tenets of belief and norms of behavior. So there must be a reasonable, he says, degree of consensus on what is meant by virtue and by vice, right? So we debate everything. There's no consensus now of what is right or what is wrong. So we know that your parents instill in you at a very early age a strong work ethic, discipline, faith, and empathy towards others. In Liberia right now, what we see is a moral lack, a rotted core, where our kids are trying to look at mentors and they find mentors lacking. So how can we begin to strengthen these core beliefs and modes of behavior and instill values in our young people?
So, I mean, what I would say is, I agree with you on the one hand, but I would also say I would maybe reframe the question a little differently, Jackie, if I may.
Yes, yes, you may.
I think I think we should first acknowledge and say to ourselves, to our society, that there are some things that are emphatically right and emphatically wrong. There's no debate. Lying, stealing, killing. Uh, there are common definitions of that. Those things are wrong, and this is why, as you know, in many countries around the world, that the laws are common with regard to those things. And Liberia is not unique in that sense. And sometimes because our country is where it is, even those basic things that we know are right and wrong, we kind of rationalize it, right? And if it's us doing the stealing, somehow that's okay. But if Jackie is doing the stealing, there's something wrong with that. And I want to say to you, our those listening to me tonight, that there are these basic things that we cannot compromise. They are wrong or they're right. We know what kindness is. right? We know what caring is. We know what evil is. There might some what I call gradations about how evil one might be versus somebody else, right? But so important that we just ground ourselves that when you steal, it's wrong. When you kill, it's wrong. When you lie, it's wrong. These basic things. And in our country today, it's kind of convoluted, as you know. And people get and say things, and they know it's not right, and then we try to rationalize it. So now, putting that aside, I also agree that there are a lot of gray areas where, because of the recent history of our country, uh, the breakdown in the family structure, there's some basic modes of behavior that needs to be reinstilled. And that will come by the example that leadership sets, right? And I don't mean leadership just in government. I mean leadership in civil society, leadership in church, or in the mosque, or in schools or whatever. And so we need to be very clear and identify leadership across the society, right? And make sure we know those people that are exemplifying those behaviors of right and wrong and caring and kindness and respect and integrity, right? Because if the leadership of the country, and I don't mean just governmental leadership, if the leadership of the country is corrupt or is not exhibiting these values, the young people will not do it, the rest of the people will not do it. If I often use simple example, if you're the leader and you tell everybody to come to work at 8 o'clock, and you go to work at 10 o'clock, everybody will come at 9:45. If you're the leader and you tell people not to steal, and you steal, everybody will steal. It has nothing to do with being Liberia or Liberian. So part of what needs to change is that we need leadership across the societal spectrum. And I know we always look to government, we always look to the president. And yes, we need to start there. But I think our challenge is to see across society because people will see the pastor more often than they will see the president. They will see the coach of the football team or the kickball team more often than they will see the president. So identifying these people across the society and making sure we are supporting them, we're reinforcing them, we kind of know each other, we exemplify the behaviors we want our fellow Liberians to follow. That's how we will have this broad-based change. So for me, these changes are all about we, not I. Yes, if I'm blessed and privileged to serve our country as leader, we will set the example across the board. But Jackie will identify people like you and others around the country, around the world, that we know have the same beliefs, the same values, because that's how we define what it means to be good or bad, right? Or to have these values. And then we can't just talk it. We gotta exemplify it in our daily lives. When the young people or others see us behaving a certain way, they will emulate that way. If we're behaving badly, if we're evil, they will behave the same way. If we're rationalizing, you know, good and bad, they will do the same. But we gotta be intentional about that. You know, in our sort of manifesto, we talk about engaging hearts and minds. We actually call it out. So we have this document where we lay out infrastructure, agriculture, education. But in this document, we talk about specifically about the need to engage hearts and minds. And Jackie, in there, we talked about the role that arts and culture play, the role that sports play, the role that religion plays. All of these things are contributing to how people feel about themselves, about how you define right and wrong, how you create the values of a country, of a society. And we believe we need to be intentional in making sure that in all of these areas, we've got people with the right values defined, because that's how we can will engage hearts and minds of Liberians to do the right things and to move Liberia forward.
And I thank you for that. And I think that Liberia, in order to move forward, as you say, we need a literate society, And on one of the other episodes, we talked about nurturing and fostering not only a literate society, but a literary society. So we want to engage our students in reading, in book clubs, in debate, in thinking for themselves, And we talked about the fact that I read that your father was an educator and he instilled the love of education in you. And we always bring it back to the personal that I spend 90% of my time in my father's bookstore just reading. So in Liberia right now, there is, I would say, a literate culture. Um, I use the term loosely, but the literary culture needs to be fostered. It needs to be nurtured. It needs to be at the bus stop taking a book. Now I know that Liberia is a developing country, so we're saying, oh, don't equate Liberia with other places, but there is a joy. There is something that reading brings. Brenda Brewer Moore is doing a lot of good work with her reading rooms, the schools, your foundation, and things like that. So, given all of that, and given the fact that we see our children struggling to have adequate infrastructure in education, and I will bring it back to literature. As if you are fortunate to become president of Liberia, how would you go about? I know it's in the your manifesto, and believe me, Mr. Cummings, we will all read it, but some of us might not have the chance. So I would say, give me two things that you would do to foster this literary culture in a country that right now is struggling for libraries and bookstores and reading rooms. What would be the two things that you would do to foster this literate and literary culture?
So if I was limited to two things, the first thing I would say, we will have to use technology, and what that means is, and we also have this in our manifesto when we talk about infrastructure, we want to make sure that there's internet connectivity throughout Liberia, that people can will have access to internet. So we all, and I use this an example unapologetically. The country of Rwanda today has internet connectivity throughout the entire country. And it is a bigger country than Liberia. That country has no natural resources. And for me, we'll make it a priority, Jackie, because that's how the best and easiest way for people to access any kind of literature, any kind of knowledge is through technology. And so let's use that, and we will work hard. We have a commitment to internet connectivity so that on your smartphone, right, you will have access to books and literature. So that's one thing we'll do, and that's an enabler, right? And we need to also enable the country, the society to do that. And then the second thing we'll do is again, I think is about setting the example, where I, as the leader, and other leaders will be literate, will be well read, because again, people see those examples, they see the fact that you're reading and you're well read. The power of the example, the power of people seeing the leader, what the leader does. And if that leader is successful, people will want to follow in his or her footsteps. So sort of two things that come to mind in terms of trying to encourage, people to learn and read. One is an enabler, and then one is an example, trying to set the example, not just myself, but getting people and others to do that. Supporting arts and culture and literature, right? Oftentimes we think those things are soft. We don't invest in them, but those are the things that are foundational to society. That's what again shapes hearts and minds. That helps people think better and more about themselves. And so investing in those areas and supporting people with those skills, I think, will be part of how we encourage that behavior in Liberia.
Yeah, thank you. And so we'll move a little bit to history. Last week, we discussed challenges and triumphs of Liberia because for July we're discussing the making of the republic. So we're going through history, and through journals and diaries of people who've come, people who have left. So I think it was Farid Zakaria who said that no country can give itself a new past, but a country can alter its future. So in last week we talked about how Liberia had such an enviable place in the community of nations. And when I say enviable, I mean that this is a country that fought against all odds to exist. This is a country that was seen as a beacon of freedom for the black race. And then we went on to describe how Joseph Jenkins Roberts bought the Calinas Island and Britain seized the Calinas Island. And then France annexed some of our territory to Guinea. So we're going through all of these things, right? The E.J. Roy loan, where E.J. Roy died because they thought he stole the money. And we came to the agreement that, you know what, despite all of these challenges, Liberia triumphed because Liberia is still here. It's still standing, you know? So if you look at the fact that Liberia is still standing, and then you look at what why nations fail, right? They say that the history of a country teaches a lesson. So as the country is going, these historical pauses become critical junctures. And these critical junctures, when something happens to a country, there's an institutional drift. Now, the way you strengthen the institutions will decide if this institutional drift is for a short while or if it continues. So we say World War II was um, a constitutional juncture, I'm sorry, a critical juncture for Liberia. We say the war, all the different wars in Liberia were critical junctures. And then we come to the institutional drift. How far has Liberia gone that it cannot come back? We, in our discussion, we said, you know what? We don't want Liberia to come back. Our desire is not to say, oh, where did that drift occur? Our desire is to transform Liberia, right? It is to create a new country where everybody can work together to build this country. So I would say that given the peculiarities of our country, given the fact that we have all of these groups coming together, and this is history, so let me just explain a little bit. We talked about the fact that there were groups from the Mali Songhay Empire who came down the coast and settled in Liberia. The Gola and the Kisi were first. They met the Pygmies there, and then the Pygmies, I guess they intermarried, but they were no more. Then we had the freed people from the United States coming in. Then we had the recaptured slaves, we were the Congos, being put to our shores. Then we had the West Indians, right? But Warner started to encourage people from the West Indies to come to Liberia. And I maintain that those are not just the four groups. We have the fifth group, which is the one of migration, which is what? The diasporic Liberians coming back. So we have all of these groups coming together. And the one commonality that binds us is migration. We've come to this land, and we are supposed to transform this place and make it ours. And we are to become one people. So I would ask you, as I've asked a lot of others who've been on our shore, what does Liberia mean to you? And I will put it in context to say we have been asking this question to all of our guests and to all of our people. We've said to them, write poetry, write essays, write letters to Liberia. This 174th birthday of Liberia, we want to know, Mr. Cummings, when you say, this is my country, I'm a Liberian, this is home, what does Liberia mean to you?
And I'll answer that question directly, but I just want to react to part of your preface for the
Yes.
question.
Yes.
Because I agree with you 100%. I don't think we want to go back. There's a lot of nostalgia about what Liberia was, and we should not forget that. And in that nostalgia, we overlook some of the ills of our country. And to your point, Jackie, we have come together from different parts all the way through our history. Migration being a common thread, but rather than that being a source of strength, it has been a source of division, and that exists still today. And so, we got the quote unquote Congo country divide. That's something we need to confront and talk about. We got the religious divide. Uh, we got some of the tribal divides, and we cannot not confront it and talk about it and talk about what it means and how we get beyond that. Jackie, I described this bowl of rice, Liberia, or bowl of fufu, or domo, or GD, whatever you eat. We all eat from this bowl. And in our history of our country, we've always limited people's ability to put their hand in this bowl of rice. First the Congo people kept everybody else out. Then some people would argue when Dole came to power, it was most of the crown people. Now, if you're not sedition, the limits and constraints. So we need a country going forward where everybody has access to the opportunities of our country. And there should be only two things that limit how much of that rice you eat. And those things you control as an individual Liberian. One is you gotta follow the rules, you gotta obey the law. We live in a country where there are no consequences for doing almost anything. You rape somebody, you steal, even if you kill, you can't get away with it. That cannot be. That cannot be the country we accept. There gotta be consequences. So if you don't follow the rule, per the rules, you will not put your hand in that bowl, all right. But you decide whether you follow the rules or not. It's nothing to do with your gender, your ethnicity, where you're from, your religion. You decide. The other constraint is if you're lazy, you're not eating right. If you're strong, you eat more. But that's up to you. Those two things, and that's the kind of Liberia we want to build. We don't want any other reason to limit your ability to participate in the opportunities of our country. And so I agree, we don't want to go back to what and all of the old constructs of what Liberia is and what it wasn't. Let's create this new Liberia. But if that's what Liberia means to me, there are two things that come to mind. One is Liberia means to me possibilities. And after 174 years, we shouldn't be saying that we should have achieved our possibilities, but unfortunately, I don't think we have. And the opportunities in our country, if we create the right environment, are boundless. I mean, and we gotta create a Liberia where the possibility for achievement of success, whatever you want to do in your life exists. Uh, the other thing it means to me, Liberia means home. It's when you think about your home, you want to make it comfortable, you want to make it accessible, you want to make it welcoming, you want a place where you can quote unquote let your hair down, you can relax, where friends can come and socialize and enjoy. And that's what Liberia means to me, and that's what this is the environment I want to create, where all Liberians feel at home, they are welcome, uh, and tap into the possibilities for what they can do for themselves. And so these are the two adjectives that when I think about our country, is possibilities for us, for our people, for our country collectively, and then this idea of it means home. It means where we can be ourselves. This is the only place that it cannot deport us from, right? This is the
Yes.
only place that nobody can tell you we're deporting you somewhere else, right? And creating this place where all Liberians feel welcome. The five groups you described, right? This is our home. This is for us collectively. No one group has a right or more right to this place than anybody else. No one group has the right to the opportunities this country affords. And that's the mentality we have to have, all Liberians. And only what you do should limit the possibilities that this country offers you.
And yet, sorry, we can take a break, just a short break, I think, for ad purposes. and then we can come back and perhaps read some comments. Anthony, can you just go on a break and come back if you prefer, or do we continue?
At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, arts and culture, entertainment, agriculture, history, religion, family, and technology. Focus on Liberia uncovers and showcases the best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Dennis Jah.
I agree with you, Mr. Cummings, about the fact that Liberia is for everybody. Unfortunately, we know that there are some who feel that they are not able to reach the bowl. You know, there are some who feel that they can't ask for the spoon. There are some who want the entire bowl. So we have our work cut out for us to be able to say to everybody, you can partake of this bowl. This bowl is for everybody. You know, it's for all of us. As we went through the journals and the diaries of the freed people who came to live in Liberia, I got pushback because I said that, you know, reading the journals, which is a text for Liberia, you can also see the trials that they went through. When the people came from the Mali and Songhay Empire, it was oral culture. So they brought the history orally with them. With the freed people who came from the United States and other places, they had diaries and journals. And as we read it, we saw that this was not a monolith group of people. There were people like Judy Ashman, who brought his young wife who died. People like Peyton Skipwith, who wrote his master. I use that word master because that's what he used, explaining. There were people who said, who wrote and said, I found a land where a black man can be a black man, and I'm not going back. And there are people who said, I want to go back. So there are all these groups of people coming in. You know, people from the West Indies, as we said, who came on the promise of getting 25 acres of land if they were a family, like the Ports that came, the Blydens who settled in Coastville. There are a lot of people who came to Liberia, you know, and all of these people came seeking freedom. So I agree with you very much when you say this is for all of us. This is our land, and it behoves everyone to work together. We need to create an inclusive narrative. This inclusive narrative can be taught in various ways. One of the ways, the arts. So whether it's dancing, whether it's theater, whether it's writing, you know, these inclusive texts tell us that we are one people. You know, we mentioned that Kendija cultural area has been sold, right? It's now the Kendija Resort. But they used to have dances there, where as the people started to dance, they would say, I'm Kru, but I'm Liberian. I'm Grebo, but I'm Liberian. I'm Gola, but I'm Liberian. So as you say, like Liberia is like a house, the overarching roof is Liberia. And then we have these rooms of the different groups, but we all work together to strengthen the roof. The roof. Now, our work is cut up for each one of us to become part of this country that we say is Liberia. So the arts, they're very, very important. And one of the things that I see is that when I travel, as I said, if I go to different states, I go to museums because I want to know who are these people? You know, if I go to a country and I travel a lot in Africa, I go to the museums. So we have a museum on Broad Street. I went there with my daughter, you know, and one of the things I've been saying is that we need to elevate that museum. We need to make it like a place where people can go and say, look, here's Liberia. If you have only one day, come and see who we are. So that one, culture, but people, unfortunately, they say the wing of culture, the monetary wing is tourism. Tourism and culture, for some reason, go together, as most people believe. How can we foster the arts and be able to bring tourism into it, knowing full well that if you're going to Liberia, let's say I'm going to Liberia and I'm like, oh, there are no hospitals, there's no physical infrastructure that support this. What happens if I go on a trek and I get sick? How can we sell Liberia, the arts, the way Ghana did? How can we sell Liberia to the outside world? And I would say also that sometimes when you tell people Liberia, the first thing they say Ebola. So not so much selling Liberia to Europe or the West. How can we invite other African countries? Tourism in-house. Tourism that I can leave Monrovia and say, oh, I want to go to Cape Mount. So how does the Cummings administration see tourism as a viable path to learning about our culture?
Yeah, Jackie. So again, I'll answer the question on tourism, but again, I also want to go back a little bit to part of your premise because I agree with it, and I want to call some of the things you said out. One of the things that when we start to discount each other's experiences, I think that's a problem, right? When we somehow think our experiences was better, was harder or easier, that's the wrong place to start. When you start having this discussion, you gotta have an open mind. All of these things are relative: easy, hard, difficult, whatever. Those are relative experiences, and they're relative to the circumstance, the individual, to all of those things. And so as we start this conversation about who we are and how we come together, that ability to listen, to empathize is important. Not to paint over what was good or bad, but just that understanding. So again, I just wanted to say it's important that as Liberians, we have an appreciation for all the experiences we bring together to form this imperfect union. And with regards to tourism, the other thing I would mention before I talk about tourism is you mentioned the museum or the gallery on Broad Street, the archives, if you will. This is something, excuse me, we need to encourage librarians to own. You know, when librarians think about Liberia, we think everybody think government. And yes, government can help. Maybe government can sort of what I call prime the pump to get things started. But boy, we need individual Liberians and society. It's hard to add that when people are impoverished, right? When people are struggling just to put food on the table. But at least as a goal and as an aspiration, we want Liberians to own this thing on their own and to do what they can in their own small way to develop, like the archives, if you will. Now on tourism, again, in our little manifesto here, we talked about engaging hearts and minds. I talked about, and we talked about arts, culture, music, the role it plays. Because when you think about changing behaviors, right? Music is a powerful tool. Art, theater are powerful tools to influence how people think about themselves, how they behave, etc. And then you tie it with tourism, and we have said we want to focus on ecotourism, and the word eco is important because if you just use tourism, many people's expectations is one of 5-star infrastructure.
Yes.
We don't have 5-star infrastructure today in Liberia, and we're not going to have it for a while. When you say ecotourism, people expect to come to live in the huts, ride their canoes down the river, go into the forest, etc., etc., etc. And so, as a government, together with the private sector, again, we have we have to be intentional about developing tourism, ecotourism, because it will create jobs, it will bring people to the country. We have a low-skilled labor force, and tourism jobs are easy to train, service orientation. So you create jobs, you bring foreign exchange, people come and see our country, you get some of the resources to develop the infrastructure. And so it has to be a very important part of how we develop Liberia. And again, we call it out. as a priority in our manifesto.
Yeah, yeah. It's for tourism. It's you must have knowledge of the history. As you know, when people like when I travel to South Africa, I'm amazed at when you go to the different museums, how they know. You know, so again, it comes to the literate culture and the literary culture, if you put it that way. And you're right, you know, that we need to be able to elevate the arts because we need to have these things at bedrock for our future to be able to say, oh, you know,
That
look at this, you know,
you
like when you go
you are
to the
breaking
museum
up.
and you're trying to see things, and it's very interesting that sometimes you have to explain to people to say, oh yeah, this is the old money from Liberia, or oh, this is the talking drum, because a lot of the people don't know. So I think it is very important to be able to build our literary culture and to build the arts for development. The arts are not just there to trot out to Robert's Field when guests are coming and people dance. The art is moving and breathing. So I totally agree with you. Maybe we can read some questions and comments while we wait for Mr. Cummings to return. We know that the internet is unstable. So, Anthony, do we have some comments that we could read? While was uh, I'm sorry. We need context to read David Jar's thing. Okay, just move that and find another one. People are entitled to their opinion. Can we have another comment, please? Mr. Cummings, knowing that a good leader must be a curious leader, please share with the Literary Hour audience a few books you've read on Liberian, African, and world history that will inform or have informed your leadership. And Panendo, before Mr. Cummings can do that, you kind of like jumped into our thing to ask Mr. Cummings. We're talking about literature, so I agree with you. I was going to ask him for a Liberian book, but Mr. Panendo wants to know just a few books. So Mr. Cummings can just let us know a few books that he's read on leadership and maybe one or two Liberian books.
Yeah, Jackie, you were picking up though. So
Okay, can
I
you hear
didn't
me
hear
now?
I didn't get
Mr. Cummings, can you hear me now? Let's stop the comments for now, and then we can see. Mr. Cummings, can you hear me now?
you're still breaking up. I don't know if it's on my side or your side. Maybe
Okay.
I will switch. Let me see if I can switch
Yeah.
Wi-Fi.
Well, if you can hear me, while you are switching, the only thing we're asking is some of the viewers wanted to know some of the books you've read, whether Liberian books or world history or leadership books. That was the question.
Yeah, Sarah, I still can't hear.
Okay.
I still can't hear. Let me see if I can switch
Okay.
internet. See if that will make it better.
Okay. Then while we're waiting for Mr. Cummings, we have a flyer from Focus on Liberia about an interview again with Mr. Cummings on Thursday at 6 p.m. So please join us for that. And I will give a plug for Professor Moses Nangwe and I. We have a show called The Literary Hour, where we invite authors. We talk about history and literature of Liberia. We talk about what it means to be a Liberian. You know, so we are inviting essays. If you want to write an essay or letter or poem of what Liberia means to you, you can send it to focusonliberia@gmail.com, and we will read it on the 25th of July for our Independence Day. The July 26th is on a Monday, so we will have a special show on the 25th, which is on a Sunday. But as we will say, please be respectful in your comments. Please confine your comments today on things literary or about culture or history. You know, join us. I think this Friday we're going to be discussing. Fernando Po and the other challenges that Liberia faced, and then from there we're going to start again talking about making of the republic, all of the challenges that Liberia faced. So we can have some comments and be reading some comments, and I will endeavor to answer while we're waiting for Mr. Cummings. And we can't have ecotourism with dirty countries. Well, I mean, yes, we know that, but that's why we have to work towards making our country clean, and it behooves every one of us. Um, and Baton Kula said they need to expose to the school age kids and encourage field trips. I totally agree with you, Baton, that these field trips that they have, they must be where the students can learn, go to historical sites, bring older people in to speak with to the kids, learn about the culture. We know that, so we definitely want people to teach the kids about culture. And I agree with you. Brand Liberia to the diaspora, missionaries, Lamco, Bong Mines, and other expats on there and other group. Yes, and that's why we're saying that when we're branding Liberia, it is true that sometimes people might hear Liberia and say, "Oh, Ebola," because people still do. So it's best if we start to sell Liberia to Africa. Come and see us. Come and see Batawi Falls. Come and see the Blue Lake. Come and see other places. And as the other Africans come, definitely we'll be able to have others come as well. We have to educate the people to know and understand what a museum is and get to visit what we have been before thinking about expanding. The museum on Broad Street, I agree with you, Miata, but the museum, I'm sorry, it's very expensive. When my daughter and I went, I was shocked because I don't know, they have different prices as they should. They do have the same different prices in South Africa, but I think that they should have field trips for young people to go to the museum. A lot of people don't even know the museum is on Broad Street. They don't know. Mr. Doe, we are waiting for Mr. Cummings, and we will encourage all of you who are listening.
I'm back, Jackie.
Oh, okay, Mr. Cummings, yeah. So, Mr. Cummings, so the question that somebody asked, and I said that they jumped the gun before, is just he wanted to know what are some of the books you've read on leadership or Liberian books. And I said we confine ourselves to books written by Liberians, but anything that you feel that you learn from it that maybe we could read it also, or books on Liberia that you think that we should read. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of my favorite books, and I encourage people to read it, is The Alchemist
Yes.
by Paulo Coelho, a Brazilian author. And I see you shaking your head, Jackie.
Yes.
It's actually a very easy read, but it's a powerful read, and it speaks to possibilities. It speaks to once you commit yourself, right, and you believe we talk about the universe conspires to get you from point A to point B. Another book I've read and I like is Long Walk to Freedom by Nelson Mandela.
Yes.
About the tenaciousness, the focus, the commitment, the selflessness, the belief, the commitment to his country and to his people. I think very, very, very powerful. And then, of course, some of the popular Liberian authors of Baltimore, Murder and Cassava Patch.
Yes.
Lots of learnings there. It was required reading during my time in high school. And again, powerful lessons about motivations, about being misdirected, and some of the what I call the old trappings of how we think about things and our traditional ways of thinking and doing things. So these are all examples of books that have influenced how I think about leadership, how I think about people, how I think about how you motivate people. But again, it starts with the individual. It starts with your belief in yourself, your commitment to a cause that is bigger than you. And those are just some examples of books that have influenced my thinking.
Yeah, and we will encourage you all to join us in our discussions on Fridays, but also to start reading Liberian novels. We said that before. The themes were very traditional, about home, the urban and rural divide. Our Liberian authors are writing We have writers like Bamba Sharif, Cotto Reeves, Che Jeple, Chebo, you know, we have Patricia Wesley, of course, we have K. Moses Nangbe, we have Augustine Sharif, we have a plethora of works coming out of Liberia, and we encourage you to read. One of the, as we said, the commonalities is about exile, being exiled and being searching for the Holy Grail, which is home. And we even said that, we said it may be that home for us, some of us who are waiting, it may be that some people will never return home. It may be that some people will return home and then again find that this is not what I want. I've outgrown this place and leave. But at the core of being a Liberian is to uplift Liberia. And that is what we've been doing on this show. We have to uplift Liberia. Liberians say if the house don't sell you, the street will never buy you. So the house must not, we're not saying that you should cover the cracks, but we must say that you must defend. You know, when you go out, if somebody says, oh, your house is like this, you should be the one to say, no, my house is not like that, you know, and then come in and work to make this house one that you can be proud of. Because we always say that, you know, we discuss this every day. Who is a Liberian? What does Liberia mean? And one of the New Year's resolution was that we're going to lift Liberia up. You know, we're going to embrace the discomfort and talk about the hard issues and say that whether you are from the indigenous side or whether you are from the free people who came from the United States, we are here on this earth, you know, on this piece of soil that for some reason God has given us. You know, he looked at the world and he said, you're going to be from here. So because he's put us on this earth, on this piece of soil called Liberia, we should work to build our country up. We should not wait for government. We should not, I mean, you were all listening when Edward Blyden said that Liberia is a dependent people. Let's say to him, it's about time that we transform our country together. So, Mr. Cummings, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Let me.
Yeah. So
Let me.
sorry.
No, let me just add to your point about building Liberia. I find that we're too hard on ourselves, and we always see the glass as half empty. And I keep encouraging us to see the glass as half full. And there are many examples. You know, we often say, you know, Liberian politics is different from any other politics, or the fact is that's not true. We just bemoan ourselves in any environment where most people are poor. The behavior we exemplify, those people will behave that way. And so it's not about being Liberians. And so we ascribe all of these negative connotations to who we are and that sort of stuff. And I remind people all the time, this is not unique to us. I've had the opportunity, Jackie, to live and work in Kenya, in Nigeria, in South Africa, in the United Kingdom, in the United States. And all of these human frailties that we ascribe, and we don't seem to ascribe the good things to ourselves, though. We all the negative things, and it's like, no, you know, those people are no better than we are. They're not innately any smarter than we are, right? And so I really want us to stop beating on ourselves. Yes, we got to be realistic about our shortcomings, about our shortfalls, and they're mostly environmental. It's not the Liberian person per se. You know, if I go back to that bull arrest analogy, part of why we keep other people out because the bull arrest has been static, shrinking. If we're growing in our bull arrest, creating more opportunities, and allowing people to put their hand in there, a lot of the behaviors will change. People will stop looking after themselves only, or their family only, or their tribe only, because they will know there'll be opportunities for them, their children, their family people, and etc. etc. So I just wanted to build on the fact that we gotta build each other up. We need to go to the negative. Even when somebody is trying to do something good, we ascribe some nefarious motive to it. We don't assume good intent. Of course, they're bad Liberians, but they're bad Americans, they're bad Ghanaians, you know, they're bad Nigerians. And so again, I encourage our audience, not to see the glass as always half empty, not to always ascribe the negative to us. Yes, we gotta be realistic about who we are, but there are a lot of good things about Liberia and Liberians, and that's what we should focus on.
Yeah, thank you so much. I agree with you that, as I said, with the literary hour, reading the letters of the of people who've come and extolling Liberia, that this is a land that the black man can be free. According to them, this is the land where we must make what we can, you know. And these people, as we said before, they labor under insurmountable odds. And the fact that Liberia is still here, the Black Republic that fought Great Britain, fought France, fought for its very survival, and it is still standing means that we've triumphed, you know. And I agree with you. When I travel, especially I go a lot to Zambia, I see when the people greet each other, they say one nation, one people, one nation, one Zambia. And that affirmation, you know, makes them uplift their country. I agree with you that it's very easy for us to see the darkness that that is hidden in places in Liberia when we can see the light, and then of course bring the light up to others. So I would encourage everybody to send me your essays, focus on Liberia at gmail.com. We're going to publish the essays. What does Liberia mean to me? And as Mr. Cummings said, uplift your country. We know that there's an underbelly of darkness, but there is an underbelly of darkness in every country. We saw that also in this country. So if we lift Liberia up, if we say, what does Liberia mean to me? And have a deep reflection with self, a conversation to say, what is it that Liberia means to me? What is this feeling in my breast when I'm going home? And when the plane is touching down, all of a sudden I'm light. What does it mean? Put those in words and send it to us. You know, we still have a few more days to collect them. And Mr. Cummings, we would like to say thank you. But if there are other questions that we didn't answer, Anthony can put one or two up before we can.
Why,
Yes.
why
Yes.
Anthony does that? I
Yes.
just want to remind your audience of some first in our history, because some people don't know. You know, the origins of what is now the African Union, the OU, started in Senegal Conference, right? The reason why Liberia has this maritime flag of convenience, where Liberian lawyers were part of the legal team that wrote the laws of the seas, right? I don't know if many Liberians know that. The concept of development banks, Liberian lawyers, Liberian economists, excuse me, were part of developing the concept of development banks. So you have development banks around the world. You have the African Development Bank, you have the Inter-American Development Bank, you have the Asian Development Bank. That concept, Liberian economists were a part of that concept because there are not capital markets in emerging markets, right? Liberia was signatory to the UN Charter. One of the first head of the World Health Organization was the Liberian Dr. Tukba. The list goes on and on and on. The first African to graduate from Harvard University was a Liberian. You know, these are all facts, right? So I think we're too hard on ourselves. You know, you mentioned earlier the first book out of West Africa written in English was written by a Liberian.
Yes.
So the list goes on and on. You know, we got two Liberian women who are Nobel laureates in
Yes.
Madame Salif and Lima Boy. And this is contemporary, so it's not going back, you know, a long ways. And so I just encourage us again not to be hard on ourselves. Yes, let's be honest about what's wrong and what we need to fix. But it's not innately because we are Liberians that things are bad. It's our environment, the circumstance. Now let's change those things, right? But let's see this glass as half full. We are better people than we give ourselves credit for. As I travel around Liberia, Jackie, and I see the ingenuity with which our people survive every day, the resilience, the tenaciousness, I'm encouraged. You know, I'm inspired. We support, we fund a STEM school on Dupo Road. And every time I get a little depressed about the political challenges,
I go visit the school. These kids are so inspiring. They're so smart. I mean, it's incredible, right? And then it reminds me of why we're doing this thing, right? Why we have to do this thing. Because they represent the future and they're as bright as anybody, anywhere, anywhere they will compete, right? And beat them, right? So I'm very passionate about the fact that we just can't be hard on ourselves. We're too hard on ourselves. And we are better people than we give ourselves credit for.
Yes, I mean, I think what is Mr. Cummings' plan for the Sokos? This is something I think every government should make it as a priority. Okay, Harunda Keita, I think Mr. Cummings can discuss that at the Hour of Politics. Today we're discussing literary, and as he says, we all have a part in that bowl to put our hand, and the Sokos also have a part to play in that. So Mr. Cummings will be on a special interview on Thursday at 6 o'clock on Focus on Liberia, and we welcome your comments on that show. Alison Saba said to promote tourism, there is a need for security, healthcare, electricity and water supply, compulsory education, etc. How can we generate and promote that development process for tourism in utilizing Liberian resources, and where do we begin? Okay.
Yeah, let me touch on that quickly.
Yes.
If we wait for perfection, you will never start anything. And that's why I talk about the concept of equal. And what you do is, and this is just one of the ideas we're throwing around. You build ecosystems in different counties around different, like Patawi Falls we mentioned, or the Sapo Forest. So you build mini ecosystems that you can take these tourists to, because it will be years before we have what I call the 5-star infrastructure that he described. But we got to get started. Once you get started, you build this ecosystem. Again, I use Patawi Falls, the Sapo Forest, Lake Piso, whatever. And when you use the word eco, people know they're coming to rough it out. They're not coming expecting 5-star hotels and all the perfect infrastructure, right? But you can still build some basic ecosystems around these landmarks around the country. People start to come, you start to generate revenue, you start to create jobs, and then you will build it out from there. You will build the infrastructure. But we can't wait until we get perfect infrastructure before we start to focus on tourism.
Yeah, thank you. Are there any other comments before we that deals with so Mr. Cummings, here's one for you.
I have some great ideas on the no, Jackie, thank you for the opportunity to have this discussion. And as I said at the beginning, it was really an opportunity for me to put on a different side of the brain, to have this discussion, to go back and refresh myself on some of our literary giants, literary history. And as I said earlier, one of the things we're focused on is the need to change hearts and minds. And one of the tools in how you do that is around the arts, the culture, and literature, and music, and dance, and sports, and religion. And we will be intentional, deliberate about using those tools, right, individually and in the interconnected way, to help to influence how we think of ourselves, how we instill the right values that we want in our young people. We will not leave it to accident. We'll be very intentional about how we use all of these things, because I think it's paramount if we're going to change and sustain, if we're going to transform. In fact, change is not strong enough a word. If we're going to transform Liberia and make it sustainable, those are some of the tools that we will use intentionally to make that happen. So thank you, and I applaud you and those who are focused on this subject, this topic, because I think it's a part of the toolkit that we need to use to change our country for the benefit of every Liberian, all Liberians. So thank you again. God bless you. God bless Liberia.
Thank you, Mr. Cummings. Thank you for joining us on this platform. And I would say, as we end every day, let us pray for our country. Tell your people to mask up, and you yourself wear a mask. And we always leave with a few words. So I will leave you with Gwendolyn Brooks. We are each other magnitude. We are each other harvest. We are each other's business, and we are each other's bond. So let us lift our country up. Whether we came on a ship, whether we walked from the different kingdoms. We are here, and let us try and uplift the country. We thank you for joining us today, and we ask you to join us every Friday at 6 o'clock here to discuss Liberian literature. So we'll leave you with names of our authors: Baiti Moore, Wilton Sangawolo, Robert Brown, Koto Reeves, Bamba Sharif, Fatima Masikwa Fambule, Jagaba Johnson. All of these are people that you should have an acquaintance with. Read the books, and we thank you. And we will end with this song that informs us and tells us again and again, we are all Liberians, and we will continue to lift Liberia up. Thank you.
We are Liberian. Liberia is our